Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the GCS Connect Leaders Series. We've got Kelby today, who's a program manager with VMware. Great conversation, very inspirational. Only been in the industry for 5 years, but already making great strides. And we talk a lot on the Leaders Series about being more diverse, helping people from different backgrounds get into the technology industry. And I think Kelby is, as we say in the session, a poster girl for this. Someone that's taking the opportunities and really doing very well within her business, which is VMware. So without further ado, here we go. It's Kelby from VMware. Good morning, Kelby. How are you?
Good morning, David. Good. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes. Speaking from London to New York, I think today. So cross the Atlantic. So great. Well, great to have you. For our listeners, we've got Kelby here, who's a program manager from VMware within the kind of partner engineering side of things. Obviously, I'm sure everyone's heard of VMware as a giant, as it were, of kind of cloud computing virtualization. So great to have a really interesting and kind of well-known brand, and also great to have a leader, and maybe even a kind of future leader as well with Kelby, someone that's kind of been speaking to Elizabeth on the diversity side, and we thought would be a great person to kind of come on and tell us about her rapid rise through the world of VMware and IT. So without further ado, hi Kelby.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
No problem. No, we were really keen to kind of get you on and just understand a little bit more about your journey. But before we start, I always like to kind of just find out a little bit about your role, what you do within the company, and the leadership that you show.
Sure. So I started in 2017 at VMware in the new college graduate program. I started as a consultant in our end user computing product suite. And I started with basically near to none experience and was able to really quickly ramp up and work for some of our very high profile customers and get them enabled in the world of modernized application and device management. After about 4 years, I decided to transition into my new and current venture, which is as a program manager in our partner solutions team, which used to be our Dell Technologies team. So essentially, I help to support our end user computing and security work streams. So anything that comes down the pipeline, that's a blend of any partner technology and VMware technology within the office of the CTO.
Wow. So I mean, the key thing I think that I just wanted to kind of talk about is obviously, like you said, starting. I noticed from your kind of university background, you did some kind of help desk work at the same time. Yeah. So you must have always been, interested in IT then. There must be something that you liked in the customer support side of it as well, like on the end user support side.
Sure. Yeah. So I actually wanted to be a lawyer my entire life. And in high school, I was a part of
the wrong way then, Kelby.
Yes, exactly. Like less schooling in the long run, right? So in high school, I took a course of study called the International Baccalaureate program. And it's basically just advanced classes, collegiate level, all of your classes, you take final exams, you write a dissertation, et cetera. And one of my teachers used to be a lawyer, and she said, Kelby, I really think you should get into IT law. Luckily enough, I was taking an IT class at the time. There's a class called Information Technology in a Global Society. And I had a professor from Florida State University come and visit, and he was pretty blown away with the knowledge that I had and knowing that I was applying to Florida State. So he encouraged me to get into IT, and he's very well plugged into this pipeline initiative. So in America, there's something called the STARS program. So their mission is to create a pipeline from K through 12 to college to jobs. And Florida State was a primary sponsor of that. So I worked really closely with those initiatives and was able to get a job within the city of Tallahassee working as a help desk supervisor. So all of these things kind of led into the leadership roles that are really required in the IT community these days, because the diversity of technology and the diversity of knowledge that people have around technology really requires very driven leaders to be able to pioneer those initiatives.
So would you say, I mean, we talk quite a lot on these leader series about diversity and opening up the IT world to many different people, because I think sometimes like a lawyer is a job that you kind of grow up wanting to be.
Sure.
And I'm assuming, and I don't take this in the wrong way, Kelby, that you weren't a kind of a software geek sitting kind of programming and that sort of thing. So therefore you kind of thought to yourself that computers, you know, you were going to be a lawyer and then computers weren't really that interesting or not for you. Is that kind of the background on that, would you say?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So in my information technology class in high school, we had to do side projects, right? And it wasn't just about the ethics of IT, it was the application of IT. And I remember trying to code something in HTML and just sobbing. And I was like, I can't do this. I don't understand. And it was really funny. Going into college, I was very intimidated by the idea of computer science. And ultimately, it was just stories that I'd heard from people. And so I would say, as leaders in the industry, please stop being so discouraging to the technical field. Like, it's not as difficult as we're making it out to be. And I think that there's so much enablement out there that it really is becoming possible for people in middle school and elementary school to start getting their hands and feet dirty in technology, right? There's like Scratch programs where the code's kind of already built and you're plugging and chugging these Legos into one another. And so really encouraging other people to get into technology, not talking about how hard it is, talking about the pros of the industry rather than the intercomplexities. Yeah,
because some of the conversations we've had is there is obviously some roles, and this isn't to do anyone's roles down, but a really, really super complex kind of Python data scientist or something like that. Those are roles that probably you're going to have, really, really hit the maths books hard to work these things out. But there's such a plethora of different types of roles and important roles and valuable roles where different types of skills are needed. And I think sometimes like computers kind of put in this box, isn't it, that you can only do it if you've done these things and you come from this background and you like these types of subjects. And if you don't, then you can't. And I think from what you're saying about the STARS program, and we've spoken to many different people on the podcast about different ways to access. And this program seems really, really interesting. Because obviously you are a kind of poster girl, as it were, then for the success, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, I think the other really big thing that I'm thankful to VMware for is for starting a new college graduate program. I think we very severely underestimate the levels of value that young people provide. I would say, in my experience in technology, it's very old. And by that, I mean, there's a lot of building blocks that technology has been built off of. So for example, I come into consulting and we're talking about, cryptography as far as like hashing algorithms and things like that. But what I didn't understand was all of the things that led up to that, all of the history that leads up to that. So I think one of the things that I really like to see in the technical industry as far as gaps is these people that have been in the industry for such a period of time, mentoring the new individuals coming into the industry, showing us the history of we're here, but this is why we're here. This is what didn't work. And this is why we're pursuing this now. And giving people a chance to prove that they're able to operate in technology at these high levels and being able to lead initiatives. It's amazing to me, the accomplishments that our new college graduate programs have been able to pump out into the industry.
Yeah, and these are ones that are still happening. This is kind of an annual thing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever I was in consulting, I was the first class in that particular PSO EUC or professional services end user computing organization. And I think now they're in their 6th class. And these people were part of elite field initiatives like the CTO Ambassador Program. We've had speakers at VMworld and our Tech Summit every single year. We've had people on podcasts like this, right? Like it just, the list continues.
And is this driven, we talk a lot about leadership, within well, this is the leader series, right? So we talk about it all the time. Is this driven from the top down, would you say, from the main kind of, C-suite people, because they see the importance of it?
Yeah, I would definitely say that this has created a really great opportunity for reverse mentorship, which is something I'm very passionate about. So being the first class, I had a lot to say about ways that we can improve the program. And everybody had very open ears to that. So whenever I first started, I was one of, I think, 5 women on roughly like an 100-person team. And they've been able to really exponentially grow those numbers. So it's created a really great opportunity for recruitment efforts so that we can get underrepresented minorities into the tech field and operating at optimal efficiency, if you will. Like they're able to get into the industry, which is part of the most difficult part of the battle. And from a leadership perspective, I've had so many conversations, director level up. So I'm 4 or 5 levels above me, where people are intent on listening and intent on learning. And I think that's a very valuable asset add to any company, being able to listen to the people that are actually living the experience.
Yeah. So when you think about, again, obviously you're now working as a leader yourself within the business. So what do you think the challenges that you've had to overcome are? Because obviously all leaders, whatever age, whatever gender, that there are challenges. But is there any specific ones that you think you've come across that you've had to, that you can kind of give help other people with who might be in your position?
Sure. 2 things really come to mind. The first, and I think that this is a pretty common one, is this idea of imposter syndrome and going into a situation feeling like you don't belong. And I heard a piece of advice one time that if someone has hired you, you have the right to be there, right? Like you have proved that you can be there. So there's a really great book on the growth mindset. And that's something that I really had to adopt as a leader. I don't have to get it right the first time. It's all about resiliency. It's all about the idea of getting back up whenever you're knocked down. So I would say, keep going. It's not just you, right? There's a lot of people that are in the same position of feeling like they don't belong, but you belong, you're there, and you have a right to be there, and you have a right to execute your skills and your strengths as best to your ability. The next challenge that I would say, and this is something we've kind of already touched on, but in the tech industry, there's a lot of groupthink and a lot of gatekeeping. So groupthink is the idea of everybody thinking the same thing and nobody speaking up, and gatekeeping is keeping the information to yourself and not sharing it with others. So to that, I say, speak up in meetings, especially if you disagree with an idea, and that's working through your own imposter syndrome and being able to say, hey, I think we could do this differently. And once you've learned something, be willing to share it with others and be willing to help it, lend a hand whenever people are going through a difficult challenge.
Yeah, and I think, particularly on the imposter syndrome, I think it's interesting for someone like myself. Like I joined GCS 25 years ago when I was a graduate, and we were 3 people, right? So, and now we're more. But what was interesting was obviously I was kind of growing with the business. So I didn't always have that so much, because basically people were just saying, right, can you sort this thing out? Well, I didn't even have a clue what it was all about. So I think, I think it was never something that I thought about so much. I was operations director at quite a kind of young age, in my when I was 30, right? So, but I think it is definitely something that, that people sometimes when they look at you, they're going to, you're younger than 30, lucky enough to be younger than 30, but do you feel sometimes people don't give you the respect, or you have to kind of earn that respect, or and if you have that imposter syndrome, that's going to make it even worse, because you almost feel like, well, I shouldn't earn that respect. So I guess it's about having confidence as well, isn't it?
Definitely. And I always preach there's a difference between self-esteem and confidence. So confidence is the ability to sit in a meeting and look presentable and speak eloquently, whereas self-esteem is knowing that you're going to be able to survive any given situation. So it's the idea of being able to say, okay, if I fail, it's going to be fine. I'm still going to have my job. And if I get fired, that's okay. I'll find another one. So having that built up self-esteem is so important, because you're able to go into things without this level of catastrophe, looming over your head. And I think that that's a really, really important mindset to have.
Where did you learn that? Was that from the stars and from the graduate intake, or just from your mum and dad, or just life?
Yeah, I would say life. I've had a very interesting upbringing and had a lot of very difficult challenges to work through. So I graduated college in 2.5 years, put myself through school, graduated with no debt, started in a very big industry, small fish in a big pond. And I think over time, failing so many times has really required me to completely break down my ego and my identity of who I am as a person and rebuild into who I want to be. I'm very passionate about visualization and manifestation and being able to see yourself in the level of like your highest good, right? Like, where do you want to be? And like, that's where you should be operating. If you want to be a CEO, wake up every morning like you're a CEO. You don't need to have that job title to enact those characteristics. You can start doing that today.
Yeah, that act as if, isn't it? And like you said, that's self-esteem and also what you bring to a company, right? You've got to feel like you've got to be bought into your company. You've got to feel that it's important. That's what I always felt myself, kind of, within my career, is, I love the company that I work for, as I'm sure you do, and then you want to kind of give as much as you can, not necessarily for the stripes or the job title, just because you think it's the right thing to do, right? If you're going to be here, I'm going to do my best job.
Exactly. Yeah. I always say, like, you're going to always have to deal with people. You're always going to have to solve problems. And I always advise people, you can be of one of two camps. You can go to work every day and do the same thing every single day. And there are people that love that and thrive off of that level of repetition. And then there's other people that problem solve, right? And being able to come to work and problem solve and have a level of fulfillment and solving those problems. It may take you a lot longer. There may be some frustrations along the way, but for example, if you get a piece of code working after 10 weeks of not being able to find your error, like, there's no better feeling than that, right? So I think knowing who you are and how you operate and what you want from a day-to-day capacity at work is crucial. It's that level of self-reflection that's going to push you farther into your career.
Brilliant. And obviously thinking, going forward, the kind of your priorities at the start of the year now. February now, obviously you're into the February now, but what are your main priorities now, that you're into this new stream and new role?
Yeah, so for me, one of the biggest things I'm trying to work on is leaning into fear. And hopefully a lot of fellow women, if you will, can relate to this. I think that there's a level of intimidation, and being a young woman in particular, there's a lot of intimidation going into customers or working with C-level executives or working with partners. And so for me, one of my main priorities this year is leaning into that fear, trying new things, not being afraid to take risks. And every time that I feel a tinge of fear, going for it anyways, right? Like pushing past it and exposing myself to that fear and recognizing that I'm able to survive that, if you will.
Yeah, as you do it more, then it becomes easier, if you know what I mean. And it's funny, I always find myself as well, with regards to being a leader or making decisions, that there's sometimes when you feel things are going quite well.
Yep.
And then I always think I don't perform quite as well. Like I relax, whereas something kind of goes bad, or I'm under pressure or stressed out about something, then suddenly like the will to survive kicks in, doesn't it? And then you do your best work. I don't know if you find that yourself. Pressure brings out the best in people, I think.
Cannot agree more. And I think the other thing that you kind of hit on is it takes repetition, it takes practice. So for example, learning a new language, you have to practice every single day. You have to expose yourself to it every single day. The second that you stop practicing is the second that you kind of lose that skill, if you will. And I think the same can apply to being a leader. Like, being a leader is not a job for the lighthearted, right? Like you have to come to work every day knowing that something is probably going to blow up, and being able to anticipate for that and being able to prepare for that, I think is absolutely crucial.
Exactly. Yeah. And then taking that responsibility, making those decisions to kind of move it forward.
Absolutely.
And you're obviously within this, we talked about this kind of apprentice program, with the ambassadors, and obviously that's something I think kind of that you've been working on with the CTO of VMware, which kind of leads on from the programs that you were in the past. So it's kind of passing it on. Tell us a bit about that, because it's obviously another interesting thing that VMware are doing that's hopefully building future leaders, I guess.
Absolutely. So I will say VMware is an amazing company to work for. I joke with people all the time, like they always tell people whenever they get out of college, like, you'll switch jobs every 2 to 3 years. And I would always joke with mentors and I'd be like, how am I ever supposed to leave? And they're like, yeah, like you got really lucky. You started at a really great company. So on that note, one of the things that VMware does really well is they enable their employees. And I have never met somebody at VMware that doesn't bust their butt working. Like they are just so driven and so passionate. So the CTO Ambassador program is for field-facing employees. So your consultants, your TAMs, your customer success engineers, people that are working with the customers day in and day out. And you apply into the CTO Ambassador program, and it gives you access into the C-level executives and allows you to work on programs that have a high level of visibility. So you apply into the program, and then you will apply into different work streams that we have available. So for example, one of them is our Nonprofit Connect initiative. So there's not a really great pipeline for nonprofit customers within VMware. So this helps to fill that gap. So the field-facing employees can bring their field experience in. The C-level executives are able to guide from a business standpoint and support and sponsor those initiatives. So I think it's great for preparing our leaders, but also for preparing the current leaders for what's coming down the pipeline and giving them direct access into what our customers are asking for.
Yeah, I mean, it's those front-facing people are generally going to kind of really understand, what's happening within the business. And with a large business like VMware, obviously, sometimes, like you said, the leaders can get kind of a bit divorced from what's happening on the ground, as it were. So I guess that's like you said, it's a great way to spread information, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the difficulty from a leadership perspective is there's this like past, present, future complexity that's constantly going on that you could probably relate to, right? Like post-mortem, like if we launched a program or a product or what have you, what went well, what didn't. Presently, like what's going on? What do I have to learn about right now? And then futuristically, like what's coming in the pipeline? Like what are our customers already asking for? They've already consumed what we presently have. How can we better enable them? And so I think that helps to solve kind of all of those inner complexities in one fluid stream rather than looking at them as individual entities.
Yeah. And so kind of going on to that subject then, VMware is a company that's at the cutting edge of technology, right? In the areas that it works. What are the big priorities? What are you leading at the moment with the CTO? Where do you see virtualization and the cloud going?
Sure. I think the biggest thing that we're seeing right now is two things, and they're kind of blended together. One is multi-cloud. If I hear the word multi-cloud one more time, just such a huge priority. It's just something our customers want so desperately, and we should be able to offer them. Like the flexibility of choice is by far the biggest customer ask. They want to be able to survey what's in the market and pick what's going to work best for them. And so being able to support their business decisions is the best gift that we can ultimately give them. And so that's going to achieve both our mission as a company to achieve like multi-cloud and multi-cloud parity, but also giving our customers that flexibility of choice. And within that, establishing customer trust. And we've heard this so much within the industry: data protection and security. How do we secure the workspace? How do we gain customer trust? How many times have we seen a company get sued or what have you because they've leaked customer data or what have you, right? Like customers increasingly need that validation that their data is being protected. So there's a huge focus right now on customer trust, empowering our consumers with the security concepts they need to know, and being very transparent about the data we are collecting.
Do you think, I'm sure in your role, you're aware of something like GDPR in the EU, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Do you see that kind of happening in the States anytime soon, or is it a bit too draconian to kind of get business to follow those rules? GDPR is tough, right?
Yeah.
I do, having lived through it being implemented in the UK, and still being governed by it, you have to think about these things a lot more than potentially you do in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And I think that because we're such a global company, those are considerations that we're having to make. So if we're making it for one region, why not make it a rule, if you will? Right. The other thing that I really see that we're working on right now is we have an executive order put out by the president that is something that we're taking very seriously. So we're pursuing zero trust initiatives. We're pursuing ransomware initiatives. We're pursuing security enablement, again, data collection and transparency with the data collection, and only collecting what we really need to get the job done, and not anything that's personal, if you will. So one of the big efforts that we have underway right now is we're working with an organization called Nist. They're a federally backed organization within the United States, and VMware is now listed as one of their partners. And I think that it's a really great way for us to start looking at levels of compliance. So we have an organization within VMware called Scope. So it's security, compliance, privacy. And this team is, their primary focus is really, how can we stay compliant with the executive order, but also with our customers? How can we instill security in every single one of our products? And how can we protect the privacy of our customers?
And that's been kind of driven like on the corporate side, isn't it, really? I
Definitely.
think what's interesting about something like GDPR is driven at the kind of the government side. But straight away, those conversations, for myself based in the UK, but it is true that then you start thinking about like your different locations in the world. You think about your data, don't you? You think about, well, what am I actually doing in my inbox? Definitely. Like what do I have in my inbox that I shouldn't have? It wouldn't happen anymore, obviously, but as a recruiter, you receive people's visas, people's passports. You're just sitting there in, obviously not anymore, but they're not password protected in your inbox. It's and once you start thinking about it, you realize that you are a massive hack risk, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's a really great Netflix documentary on the concept of social networking and how we basically sign our lives away sometimes to
social
connect.
Dilemma is that social dilemma?
Yes, exactly. And I, sure enough, turned all my notifications off immediately after watching that documentary, because I think one of the quotes in the documentary is, there's only two industries that refer to consumers as products, and it's like the drug industry and the technical industry. Like we are consumers of those of technology, and kind of sign our lives away, right? Like terms and conditions, who's ever read them? And so that's something that I'm very passionate about, particularly within the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, is enabling more women and minorities in the security space. Because while we've definitely implemented a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in technology as a whole, I think there's a huge need for more diversity of thought within the security space. So that's something I'm definitely passionate about, is enabling that holistic view of security.
Fantastic. And I think everything that we can kind of do to change that and push that forward is really, really important. And when you think about that, and you think about kind of moving into these areas, what sort of advice would you give to other people that you're looking to kind of progress their career quickly, and want to enter and become a leader within a large corporate, whatever kind of background they're from, really? Because I think the age and the speed is the most important thing, really.
Definitely. So I think that this can be solved in quite a few ways. One thing that I will say is, from my perspective, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not about eliminating the white man out of the conversation. So I know oftentimes whenever this topic is brought up, that's kind of the first inclination is, well, like, I'm sorry, it's not my fault, right? And it's not a blame game. It's ultimately, okay, this has been done. What can we do to rectify it? So for me, something that's really important is bringing back the white man, if you will, into the conversation. I don't know if I'm technically allowed to say it like that, but I'm going to, because that's what I believe. But sponsorship is so incredibly important. So recognizing that underrepresented minorities and people of these communities have overcome so many obstacles to be able to obtain their success. So I think it's really important that people that are in levels of seniority and our leaders are encouraging and empowering these communities to raise their hand for opportunities, and that'll provide them with more experience and exposure. And while you're sponsoring individuals, being able to educate yourself, it's not the burden of a traditionally marginalized group to teach you diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you're able to seek out the abundance of resources on this topic, being able to have those honest conversations and establish a level of reverse mentorship is an incredibly useful tool for people that are looking to increase their diversity, equity, and inclusion at their organizations.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely something. Every conversation within this, they talk about difficult conversations, don't they? You know, asking the difficult questions. And I do think it kind of works both ways, you know, and you have to ask those questions because you've grown up in a mindset which you think this is how it should be. Obviously, we know nothing ever stays the same, so things change all the time. But I think, you know, you have to accept things change.
Sure.
I'm talking from my perspective here. You know, the things have changed and have changed for the better.
Yeah.
You know, but every change brings questions, you know, things to deal with, challenges, etc., etc. And I think that you can sometimes take a it's not to do with me. You know, this is for the next generation, for some other people to kind of worry about, but it's for all of us really, because it's a social thing, it's a society thing, and we're all involved in it, aren't we?
Yeah, there's another really good documentary. I think it's called Bill Gates' Mind, something along those lines. And they talk about how Bill Gates thinks. Yeah. And Melinda Gates tells a really interesting story about this project that she and Bill were working on in Africa to establish some level of toilet system or septic system that didn't require all of this. We've obviously
watched all the same programs, Kelby.
Yes,
I've watched this one as well.
Yes. Perfect. So, you know, when she's talking about the part where she starts talking to women in the village and the women are like, we're not going to use what he built. Sorry. And she was like, oh, why? And she's like, there's no top to it. Like there's predators and people that will look inside and we can't have that. We need something that's more protective. And for me, that really showcases the importance of diversity of thought. It's not even about who and what they look like and what background they come from, but it's the idea that the more people that you have, the more perspective you have, and you're able to provide products and services to individuals that help serve a wider range of people. So you're going to get it right the first time more often than not if you have that level of diversity of thought and people that are willing and able to speak up in those instances.
Yeah, and it progresses things forward, doesn't it? And
yeah, exactly.
I remember Bill Gates with his bag of books.
Yes, exactly.
He just like carries like a big shopping bag of books wherever he goes, and probably reads there because he's like IQ of 5 billion or something, and he really reads one a day or something. But he's got an Intel processor in his head. Yeah, and he also goes. Does he have like a week where he just goes and sits and reads books on his own for the whole week? And
sounds great.
Well, it sounds brilliant. Isn't it? I'm well up for that one. So, one day I'll get a chance to do that. So you know, but my last question that I always ask people is, obviously, you know, the last 18 months, particularly for yourself, obviously, because it's been, you know, lots of change kind of going on, you know, but as a leader, what's the most important thing that you've kind of learned on your journey during COVID, hopefully coming out of COVID, that you can impart?
Yeah, hopefully. Every time I turn on the news, that there's a new variant. So I think the biggest thing for me is being kind to others. I think that leaders in particular are very driven and very ambitious people, and they want to get a job done. And I think that there is a space and a place for that. And I think that's really wonderful. However, that comes with the fact that we work with people, right? Like we are not robots. People come to work with family issues and health issues and mental health considerations. Like we are all going through a global pandemic. And I don't think anybody has really shed any amount of light on that, right? So I think for me in the past 18 months, it's being kind to others and recognizing that you don't know what somebody's going through. So something that I've started to implement is every time I jump on a call, I ask people like, is there anything that I can do to support you today? Is there anything that I can help you with? Rather than, hey, how's it going? How was your weekend? Do you have any fun weekend? Like people may not have fun weekend plans. Like they may be going to the hospital to visit somebody that is in their family that's sick or what have you, right? Like, so changing it more to creating a level of safety and closeness within your employees or your coworkers where you can, if that's something that you're able to give, rather than focusing on the output of what your employees can provide to you. Like, again, we're humans, we're not robots.
I definitely think that, you know, COVID, one of the things it's done is bonded teams more.
Definitely.
I think we understand each other more. I think we know the inside of people's houses. You know, we kind of see their kids and that sort of thing. You know, it's less of a division between work and lives, and I think that's really helped people to be kind to each other, because we've been through like you said, we've all been through the pandemic together. If we're all kind of working together and still talking to each other, you know, that family bond, which is so great within a business, you know, or within a team, you know, that real kind of, I care about these people. You know, you can't buy that, but it is important, isn't it? And I think COVID has helped us to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Our generation, our generation has yet to experience like one unifying event, right? Like World War I or World War II or Vietnam or what happened, right? Like those were significant historical events that really solidified the community. Like, we're banding together and we're doing this thing together. And this is our generation's version of that, in my opinion. And we needed that cultural reset. So I'm hoping that it'll help to continue to unite us rather than divide us. We'll see. I mean, we've all watched the news, so we'll see where that goes.
Well, let's hope so. Let's end this on a positive note, Kelby.
Exactly. Yes.
Been great to speak to you. You know,
absolutely.
Fantastic to hear about your journey and your story. And you know, we wish you all the best for the future and look forward to speaking and working with you in the future, Kelby. Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, David. It was truly a pleasure.